Good afternoon. We're here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my sweetie took me to a place with a lot of trains. And we're gonna ride a real steam train right now. Look!
Inside of that clearing there will be a sign, and next to that sign is a tree with a yellow line painted on it. That yellow line represents the high water mark from the Great Flood of 1867. At 9 feet above the track, it explains why this line had to be elevated. We're now crossing our first bridge over South Chickamauga Creek. In the water below, you may spot some turtles, river otters, or geese. Those stone piers mark the site of the original bridge. On top of those stone piers would have been a wooden decking that the rails would have run on. Now, the original bridge in that location was made entirely of stone and was washed away in a flood in 1861. Unfortunately, an engineer did not see that that bridge had washed away in time, and, well, let's just say he and his train went for a swim. We're now crossing our second bridge over the Western and Atlantic Railroad. That line below us there was the first line into Chattanooga, being completed by the state of Georgia in 1850. That line runs from Atlanta to Chattanooga and is still owned by the state of Georgia today. They currently lease it out to CSX. That line is also home to a very famous story from the Civil War. Some of you may have heard of it, and that would be the Great Locomotive Chase. Now, for those of you who have not heard of it, the Great Locomotive Chase is the story of Union spy James Andrews and 23 others known as Andrews Raiders. They disguised themselves as civilians and made their way to Big Shanty, Georgia, which is today Kennesaw, Georgia, and stole a locomotive named General while it was on a fuel, water, and mill stop. They planned to race the General all the way north to Chattanooga, while burning bridges and destroying track and telegraph wires along the way in an effort to sever the crucial Confederate supply artery. They were pursued by the General's conductor, William Fuller, and the locomotive he commandeered named the Texas. Now, the Texas was facing south, so for the duration of the chase, he had to run the locomotive in reverse. The General ran out of fuel just north of Bengal, Georgia, about 18 miles from Chattanooga. All the men were caught. 8 of them, including Andrews himself, were unfortunately hung in Atlanta. They are today buried at the Chattanooga National Cemetery around a bronze replica of the General, just a few miles from our current location. The rest of the men either escaped prison or were exchanged for Confederate prisoners. Andrews Raiders were the very first to ever receive the Medal of Honor, but Andrews himself did not, as he was a civilian and not eligible. If you'd like to know more on that topic, there are many books and films based on that event, including Buster Keaton's silent film The General, and one of Walt Disney's lesser-known films from the 1950s, also titled The Great Locomotive Chase. Both locomotives involved in that chase are still preserved today. The Texas is on display at the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and the General is on display at the Southern Museum of Civil War and Locomotive History in Kennesaw, Georgia. Now, for those of you riding in the green car, or the 906 where I'm speaking from, I'd like to point out that you may have noticed that there is a wall separating the two halves of this coach. That is because when this coach was built, it was known as a Jim Crow car, used during the era of segregation. When the Interstate Commerce Commission desegregated the railroads in 1955, most cars of this type would have those walls removed. For some reason, this wall here was kept intact. We're not sure why. When we acquired the coach, we made the decision to preserve that wall in its original condition as a reminder of a very unfortunate time in our nation's past. And as far as we are able to tell, it is the only coach in operation in the world today that has that wall preserved. Now we're about to cross our third bridge over Town Boulevard. Originally, this road would have tunneled underneath the railroad, hence its name. When the Southern Railway abandoned this line in the 1950s, the roof of that tunnel was opened up to avoid maintenance costs. After the land was donated to us, we put a bridge over that gap, so today we have Town Boulevard without a tunnel. It's also the only place we can legally run over cars. Now if you look to the right, I'll point out some of my favorite trees along this route. There's this one. And this one. Oh, and this one here with the leaves on it. I call that one Chris. Chris Pine. We're now making our climb up Missionary Ridge. But rather than travel over it, we're going to travel through it. Through the Missionary Ridge Tunnel, also known as the Whiteside Tunnel. This tunnel is 986 feet long, about the length of 3 football fields. It was completed in 1858, dedicated in 1859, and was excavated entirely by pick and shovel, as dynamite was not invented until 1867. So I guess you can say it went off without a bang. This tunnel was excavated from both ends of the ridge, meeting in the middle. When both portals did meet in the middle, they were only off center from each other by 3 inches. During World War II, this tunnel would see as many as 70 trains a day. Now this tunnel is the reason that this line was eventually abandoned. After World War II, the railway's equipment was becoming too large to fit to the pre-Civil War era tunnel. Also at the time, the tunnel was single track, while the rest of the line was double track, creating a major bottleneck. So that a new line was built to the north and bypasses the ridge altogether. Now, if you have a flashlight app on your cell phones, I do encourage you to get those out at this time to shine them out the windows and illuminate the tunnel walls as we pass through so you can view them. Now that was the whistle of our locomotive you just heard, signaling our approach to the tunnel, meaning we will be entering the tunnel at any moment. While in the tunnel, you may notice we are very close to the tunnel walls, and at times there are indeed less than 10 inches of clearance between us and those walls, so it is a very good thing we don't have any open windows on this train. We are now on the west side of Missionary Ridge. You can imagine traveling on a Southern Railway passenger train in the early 20th century, as this is how you would have approached downtown Chattanooga. Right to that tunnel there, with your final destination being Terminal Station, which has today been converted into the Chattanooga Choo Choo Hotel. Now, of course, passenger trains back then would have consisted of more than just passenger coaches. For example, there might have been a baggage car, an RPO car, sleeping car, lounge car, on some trains even a dome car or an observation car. Then on most trains was my favorite, the dining car. Speaking of dining car, who knows how a steam locomotive eats? It choo-choo-choos.
That was just too silly.
Now we've almost reached the end of the 3 miles of track donated by the Southern Railway, so in about 5 more minutes we'll be coming to a stop at our East Chattanooga depot. Once there, you have the option of either staying on board the train for the layover, or joining me as we do a demonstration of our turntable, as well as take a guided tour of our back shop. Actually, no, we're not doing that, sorry. Got a bit ahead of myself. Those back shop doors have been suspended for the time being because of COVID-19. But anyway, so I do recommend you do join me for this demonstration, as this is one of the only places you can still see what's about to take place. The depot here will be open as well. There are restrooms inside, so if anyone needs to use the restroom here at East Chattanooga, those are available inside the East Chattanooga depot. Please remain seated until the train has come to a complete stop. We will be unloading the train by car colors to ensure social distancing. Once you have exited the train, take a left turn down the stairway or the ramp, follow that pathway down to the turntable, and then once we have everyone gathered around the turntable, we will begin the demonstration. Now, I am also required to state by order of the Hamilton County Department of Health, while at the turntable, please keep a 6-foot distance from those parties around you. And when you reboard the train, we are required to ask that you return to the same car and seat you are in at this time. So please take note of your car color, should be the color of your wristband. And then if you look above your windows, or for some of you might be on your baggage rack, there should be a seat number there for you to memorize. Please return to that same seat and car on the way back. To the right is a section of track running downhill there. That is the East Chattanooga Belt Line. Extends about 7 miles into downtown Chattanooga and then connects to the Chattanooga and Chickamauga Railway. Those two lines combined extend to a point just south of Summerville, Georgia, 52 miles from here. And those are the lines we use on our longer excursions, such as the Dinner on the Diner, the Chickamauga Turn, and the Summerville Steam Special. Now to the left is a large brick building. That building is our warehouse, where many of the artifacts that are not currently on display are stored in climate-controlled conditions. In front of that back shop, or in front of the warehouse, is a blue car. That blue car is one of our operational dining cars that we use on our longer trips that include grill services. To the distance off in the left is another large building that says Tennessee Valley Road Soul Shops on the front. That building is our back shop, where all of our repairs, maintenance, and restorations do take place. Just next to the train in the same direction is a large pile of coal, which is of course the fuel source for the locomotive pulling us today. Outside of that back shop, there are a few diesel locomotives parked outside. With our current operating schedule of Thursday through Sunday, we do operate one of those diesel locomotives to pull this train on the weekdays, and then the steam locomotive on the weekends. So by visiting on a Saturday, you do get the experience of riding behind an authentic coal-fired steam locomotive. Now, when this museum was founded in 1961, this was the original main side of the museum. So this is where you would come get on the trains at, and the Southern Railway only donated 1.5 miles to start with. So you would have ridden from here just to the other side of the tunnel and then reversed back. In the 1980s, the Southern Railway donated another 1.5 miles. That allowed us to extend out to the Grand Junction site. And at that time, we converted Grand Junction to the main site of the museum, and then converted this into what I like to call the industrial side of the property, where all the manual labor takes place to ensure the continued operation of the railroad. I hope the trip's been outstanding so far. Speaking of outstanding, if you're in the green car and would like to join the demonstration, I need you to go be outstanding by the turntable. So if you're in the green car, you can head to the exit at this time.
Where's the turntable?
Now for the rest of us while we're waiting, to the right down by that road down there, that is North Chamberlain Avenue, you'll see a concrete embankment up next to the road there. That concrete embankment was the bridge support that would have supported this line as it would have continued on into downtown Chattanooga originally. At this time, if you're in the red car, you can head to the exit.
Hi everyone, welcome to East Chattanooga. As you can see, we have reached the end of the line. So we're going to pull the locomotive onto this turntable and spin it around for the return trip to Grand Junction. Now this table you're looking at here was constructed in 1916 by the American Bridge Company and was used by the Central of Georgia Railroad in Macon, Georgia. After World War II, locomotives became too large to fit on this table, so it was moved to Cedartown, Georgia at that time to be used at the NFA branch line. Now, we acquired it in the 1980s, moved it to this location, and it has been in use here ever since. This table is 80 feet long, and it weighs in at 80 tons. Keep in mind, the average school bus only weighs about 6 or 7 tons. Now, our locomotive has a total weight of 215 tons, so when it is on the table, the overall weight between the two is going to be sitting very close to 300 tons. So it may surprise you to know that this table was originally turned by hand. It was an Armstrong table. There would have been poles extending off each end of the table, and it would have taken about 4 people to push those poles to spin the table around. Do we have any volunteers? We're going to need 4. I'm not seeing any hands. That's not good. We're going to be stuck here, I guess. Alright, that's a good thing we don't do it that way anymore anyway. We just use a small 25 horsepower motor under the operator shed here that our conductor Dave will be operating. Now, our locomotive today is the Southern Railway 4501, built in 1911 by the Bolton Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It was built for the Southern Railway as a mainline freight locomotive. Retired by the Southern Railway in 1948, at that time it was sold to the Kentucky and Tennessee Railway in Stearns, Kentucky, to be used to haul coal down to the mine. Again, retired from that railroad, it was then purchased by one of our co-founders here at the museum, Paul Merriman, for $5,000 of his own cash, and then brought to Chattanooga under its own power in the early 1960s, and then has been in operation on and off here at the museum and on mainline excursions ever since. Now, this is the first piece of equipment ever acquired by the museum here, and it is still the most famous piece of equipment we have in our collection. This locomotive is a 282 Mikado, meaning it has 2 small pilot wheels in the front, 8 large drive wheels in the middle, and a set of 2 trailing wheels under the cab and firebox. This is the first 282 ever purchased by the Southern Railway, of hundreds they would eventually purchase. And ironically enough, it is the only Southern Railway 282 that survives today. This locomotive operates at 205 psi. It has 63-inch diameter driving wheels and produces 53,900 pounds of tractive effort. Now, as you can see, the wheelbase of this locomotive does fit on the turntable, but the locomotive itself is longer than the turntable, extending off both ends by a few feet. So if you're at that yellow line, I do need you to take an extra step or 2 back so the front coupler does not give you a slap on the way around. Now, if you have a look up in the cab there, you'll see our engineer, Brian. He is responsible for operating this locomotive and getting us here and back safely today. So go ahead and give him a wave. Is up in the cab there, our fireman Joseph is feeding 3 to 6 tons of coal a day into the firebox where it is burning. Now on the front side of the firebox there are a series of tubes that run the length of the boiler. Those are called the flues. The hot gases from the fire travel through the flues and then up and out the stack. Surrounding the flues and the firebox is water. That water is heated by those hot gases and converts to steam. Steam of course does expand, raising the boiler pressure up to 205 psi. Now when Brian opens that throttle, that steam is channeled down into these large cylinders you see on the side of the engine here. Inside these cylinders is a large piston the steam is pushing on either side of. Those pistons are connected to the rod you see on the side of the engine, and those rods are connected to the driving wheels. So as the piston is being moved in and out, it is rotating those rods, therefore turning the driving wheels and propelling the locomotive. After that steam has been used, it mixes with the hot gases in the smoke box here at the front of the locomotive and then shoots up and out the stack. And that exhausting steam is actually what creates the chugging sound you hear when you see a steam locomotive. table up with the correct track today, we still have to use the original method, and that would be the intake method of eyesight. Again, to look up on the track again, you'll see our fireman Joseph. He is responsible for feeding that fire as well as maintaining the water level on the boiler to produce the steam this engine operates off. Without him, this locomotive would not be going anywhere, so give him a wave as well. Now, most of you have most likely seen this locomotive before and don't even realize it. It has been used in many Hollywood films and music videos. For example, it was used by Johnny Cash on many occasions in his music videos, as well as in film productions such as Full Freight and the most famously the 1999 film October Sky starring Jake Gyllenhaal. Those of you that have seen that film may recall a scene in which the kids are ripping up what they thought was abandoned tracks to get the scrap money out of it. Then a train comes along and they panic. Well, the train you see in that film was the 4001 repainted to resemble a Norfolk combustion locomotive. Of course, our property here is involved in a lot of film productions too every few years. We've been involved in films such as Water for Elephants, Leatherhead, most recently the movie 42, the story about baseball player Jackie Robinson's life. Now, as you can see, our train is currently sitting on track 1, but we headlined the locomotive up to track 2. That is so it can run around our train beyond the switch, then reverse through that switch into the other side of our train to pull us back in the opposite direction. Now, this time we can go ahead and start making our way back to the train for that return trip to Grand Junction. Please make sure you do return to the same seat and car you rode in on the way over, and there are restrooms available in that depot if you need those. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to come up and ask me at this time. I'll be happy to answer your questions for you.
Alright everyone, welcome back aboard. Now like I mentioned earlier, that back shop is normally included as a part of the tour we give, but we're not allowed to do that at this time, as we do not have the space to allow social distancing in there, so I'm going to tell you about it on board instead. Now all railroads have had a back shop just like ours back in the day, but on a much larger scale, and the reason they were called back shops is because they were always in the back of the property hence the name. Our back shop has a number of features in it that allows us to work on our equipment, such as the 4-foot drop pick between the rails, the 10-10 overhead crane, machine shop, and the wheel shop in the back. In terms of restorations, a steam locomotive back here from the Golden Age of Steam could have been rebuilt in about 1 month, but for us, for example, our other operational steam locomotive took us 10 years to rebuild. And that is because they had 3 things back then that we don't have today, and those are the parts, the amount of skilled labor, and the money. If a part breaks to one of these locomotives, we can't just go to a hardware store and get a new part. believe me, I have tried. AutoZone does not have them, so we have to machine new parts from scratch in the back shop. Next is the amount of skilled labor. Back then, there would have been about 100 to 150 people working on a single locomotive at a time, doing all kinds of various tasks in an assembly line-like fashion. But today, that is a very, very specialized and sought-after skill. On average, we'll have just 1 or 2 people at a time working on those restorations. And then last, of course, is money. So, on average today, steam locomotives do cost a little over $1 million a piece to restore to operation, and we are a small nonprofit educational organization. So where do we get that kind of money? Well, one is our ticket sales, of course. A portion of every ticket sold does go towards our restoration fund. Next is our freight service. We do handle a small amount of freight in the Chattanooga area. Then last, of course, is the donations. Now, the reason we're doing all this work here is because we want to educate the public about the history and the importance of the railroads. And to put that into perspective, keep in mind it was when these trains first started to appear that this nation really did start to evolve and expand. It was the railroads that did help us expand westward and connect the coast. In fact, it was just last year that we celebrated the 150th anniversary of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, May 10th, 1869. It was also very important for the war efforts, Civil War, World War I, World War II. If it wasn't for these railroads handling the mass transportation of troops and supplies for the war efforts, we could have easily lost any one of those wars. Then even just for travel back then as well. Before the airlines and the interstates existed, to travel long distance you had to go by train. So there would have been no vacationing, no traveling for business, no going to visit family and things of that matter. Even today they're still very important because today's railroads do handle the majority of this nation's freight. It is the cheapest and most efficient way that freight is moved today. So, for example, most of the items you purchase in stores or online on a daily basis at some point along their journey are transported by train. Now, at this time, to sit back, relax, enjoy the rest of the ride back to Grand Junction. I will be roaming the train, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me and I will do my best to answer your questions. And if I don't have an answer for you, I will make something up that sounds good.
See the train spotter?
Yeah.
visit with us again in the future, we do offer many other longer trips that you can choose from in the future, such as the Dinner on the Diner, the Chickamauga Turn, the Summer Bowl Steam Special, as well as our holiday themed trips such as the Halloween Area Express and the North Pole Limited, our annual Day Out the Promise, and our Hawaii trips out of Etowah, Tennessee. And we do thank everyone for your patience and understanding today as we implement health department guidelines to ensure everyone's safety on the train. Please remain seated. Once we come to a police stop, we will be unloading the train again by car color to ensure social distancing. If you've not done so already, make sure you do check out our display yard out by the parking lot. Lots of equipment out there for you to have a look at and explore. There are, for example, a few cabooses down there, or would that be cabooses? Cabisi. Anyway, there's some red things out there. If you'd like to go back into the station, we do have to ask that you go through the front door, walk around and enter through the front door as there are designated entrance and exit doors at this time. In the gift shop, I do recommend the full feature-length documentary titled And Then There Was One. It is the full history of the locomotive that is pulled your train today, and it is very well put together. At the deli, they do have some locally made ice creams from Clumpy's Ice Cream Company. That includes 2 original flavors that you can only get at this depot. Those are the Smoke and Cinders and the Rocky Road flavors. If you'd like to see the locomotive turnaround for our next trip, it will be doing so using the Y, that section of track out front of the station. So if you walk to the front side of the station, it is a great opportunity for some photos and videos of the locomotive turning around. We'll also be parking the locomotive for about 5 minutes or so at the pedestrian crossing in front of the station. So it is also a good opportunity to get some selfies with the locomotive and also have a closer look at the locomotive. Now please make sure you don't forget any personal belongings today, such as hats, glasses, keys, wallets, purses, cell phones, husbands, wives, and kids. If you did enjoy your trip today, my name is Zach with an H, and if you did not enjoy the trip, in that case my name is Zach with a K. Now if you're in the green car, you may make your way to the exit. All other cars, please wait until your car color is called. So red, yellow, and blue, please stay seated.
There's snacks and dining room. Say hello. And beautiful art by Jim Jordan. And they are for sale to support the railroad. Working on trains is very dangerous. It's been 1 day since the last accident. So show the viewers what we got in the gift shop. And a pin for my denim riding jacket.